All right, let's talk about probability and sums. So find the probability you will roll a 10 or above when you're rolling two standard number cubes. All right, so let's look at our possible outcomes here. Remember, probability is just the number of favorable outcomes over the total. So we need to find the number of total outcomes first. That's our denominator. Well, there are 6 outcomes possible on the first die, and then 6 on the second one. So our total outcomes is just 36. And if we would have rolled it 3 times, we would have multiplied that by 6 again and got 216. So favorable, though, are how many times can we get a 10 or above? Well, on the first die, we could roll a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. On the second die, we could roll the same numbers. And I'm going to link these. Let's say a 10 or above means it includes 10. So we could have a 5 and a 5. There's 1. Because it's each pair. There's 1. So we could roll a 5 and a 6. We could roll a 6 and a 6. Or we could roll a 6 and a 5. Notice I don't count these twice, the 6 and the 6 and the 5 and the 5, because this is saying like I roll a 5 on the first die, a 5 on the second die. Well, that's the same as rolling a 5 on the second and a 5 on the first. You don't count them twice. That only happens once. But these are unique because this is a 5 on the first die, and that's a 6 on the second, which is different than getting a 6 on the first die and a 5 on the second. So we have 4 favorable outcomes out of 36, and then we just reduce that, so divide by 4, and we would get 1 out of 9. All right, you can try one on your own now. So find the probability you will roll a number less than 5 when rolling two standard number cubes. Go ahead and pause the video and give that one a try. All right, and now for the solution. Okay, so what could we roll that would be less than 5? Well, we could roll a 1 on the first and a 1 on the second. There's 1. That would give us a sum of 2. We could roll a 1 and a 2. We could roll a 1 and a 3. But we can't roll a 1 and a 4 because it has to be less than 5. So we're looking for sums that are 4 or less. So now what if it started with a 2? I could roll a 2 and a 1, a 2 and a 2, but not a 2 and a 3. And then if the first one started with a 3, I could roll a 3 and a 1, but not a 3 and a 2. And notice I was organized how I wrote those. I started with 1 being my first roll, and then 2 being my first roll, and then 3. And you can see the pattern. It goes 3, 2, 1. So we have 6 favorable outcomes out of 36. And if I divide those by 6, I get 1/6.